I've heard people say silence is golden. Maybe it is, for those who have peace inside their hearts. But when you've spent a lifetime holding words behind your teeth, silence feels less like gold and more like iron, heavy, cold, unbending. My name is Marjorie Collins, though everyone around Lake Bell just calls me Marge. I'm 76 years old, widowed for almost 12. I live in a cedar-sided house about half a mile from the lakeshore. In summer, you can smell the water from my porch. In winter, the whole world turns white and still, as if God himself presses the mute button. People say I'm the kind of woman who always keeps herself composed. Hair set, blouse pressed, smile practiced. They're not wrong. I've had decades of rehearsal. You learn to wear calmness like a cardigan, something you slip on before stepping outside, no matter the weather underneath. The house creaks now more than it used to. It's just the wood drying out, the handyman tells me, but sometimes it sounds like footsteps, soft and careful, moving down the hallway. My husband Charles used to tease that our home was haunted by memories, not ghosts. I think he was right. Every room here carries a story. The kitchen smells of coffee and Sunday mornings. The living room remembers Christmas laughter, toddler footsteps, and the clink of toy cars against furniture. And the back porch, that's where the hardest conversations always happened. That porch heard Charles's apologies after long, angry nights. It also heard my quiet acceptance. When you love someone who burns hot and fast, you learn to speak in whispers. At first, you whisper to calm them. Later, you whisper so you don't wake the fear. I thought the silence was strength. It took me 40 years to realize it was surrender. My daughter, Rebecca, lives just across town now, 15 minutes away. She's 48, married with one son, Ethan, my pride and joy. She teaches third grade at the local elementary school, the same one she once attended. And every time I drive past the playground, I can still see her younger self. Red mittens, crooked pigtails, calling, "Mom, look!" while I pretended not to cry behind my sunglasses. Rebecca was a bright child, sensitive and kind, maybe too sensitive. She saw everything in our home, even when I tried to hide it. Children always do. They learn the language of slammed doors before they learn cursive. When Charles raised his voice, Rebecca's little shoulders would stiffen, and she'd busy herself coloring or feeding the cat. Afterward, she'd tiptoe into the kitchen, asking if I needed help. She thought silence was kindness, too. That's what haunts me most. It was early October when Rebecca called, her voice small through the static. "Mom, can you come by tomorrow? Mark and I, we need to talk." Mark, her husband. I'd always liked him. Polite, reliable, the sort of man who fixed faucets before they dripped. But lately, something in Rebecca's tone when she mentioned him reminded me too much of my own from years ago. Forced cheer, careful phrasing. I said yes, of course. Mothers always do. After I hung up, I sat by the kitchen window, watching the wind stir the maples in the yard. The leaves spun and fell, covering the grass like little confessions too late to be retracted. The next afternoon, I baked apple cinnamon cookies, Ethan's favorite, and drove across town. The air smelled like rain and smoke from distant chimneys. Rebecca's house sat at the end of Maple Lane, 2 stories, white shutters, a porch swing that creaked the same rhythm as mine. When she opened the door, I saw it immediately. The weariness behind her smile. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, stepping aside. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and tension. A children's cartoon murmured on the TV, unattended. Ethan's sneakers lay by the couch. Mark stood near the window, hands in pockets. He greeted me politely, but his jaw was tight. I'd seen that look before, 40 years ago, on another man who believed his temper was just honesty. We sat down. Rebecca clasped her hands on the table, the way she used to when reciting prayers as a child. "Mom," she began, "Mark and I have been arguing a lot. Ethan's been asking questions. I don't know what to do anymore." Mark exhaled sharply. "It's not as bad as she's making it sound." Rebecca flinched at his tone, then looked at me, silently pleading for something. Maybe permission to speak, maybe courage. I wanted to tell her to breathe, to say everything, but my throat closed around the words, because the memory of Charles's raised voice lived in that room with us, invisible but loud. So instead, I said the same useless phrase my own mother once told me: "Marriage takes patience, sweetheart." The moment I said it, Rebecca's face fell, and I hated myself. That night, back home, I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped softly on the roof like someone knocking on my conscience. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes from years long gone. Charles pacing the hallway, me sitting on the bed pretending to read, Rebecca's door quietly closing down the hall. It had been decades since Charles passed. A heart attack at work. Sudden. People told me I was lucky it ended that way. No slow decline, no hospital bills, just finality. But grief doesn't always come with relief. Sometimes it comes with unfinished sentences and the question, what if he changed? For years after his death, I told myself we'd had an ordinary marriage, that every couple argued. It wasn't until I saw Rebecca's careful smile that I realized ordinary shouldn't hurt that much. The next morning, the phone rang early. It was Ethan. "Grandma, can I come stay with you for the weekend?" "Of course, sweetheart. Is everything okay?" He hesitated. "Mom and Dad are mad again." I closed my eyes. "Pack your things. I'll pick you up after school." When he climbed into my car that afternoon, his backpack looked too heavy for an 8-year-old. On the ride home, he stared out the window, silent. Finally, he said, "Grandma, do people forget how to be nice when they grow up?" I swallowed hard. "Sometimes, sweetheart, they just forget how to listen." He nodded slowly, thinking. "Then maybe they need someone to remind them." I smiled, though my heart ached. Maybe they do. That night, after I tucked him into the guest bed, I sat on the porch, the same porch that had heard my silence for years. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, and the wind carried a faint echo of laughter. Rebecca's when she was little. I thought about how patterns replete when we don't name them, how silence is a seed that grows into the next generation's fear. I decided then, quietly but firmly, that I wouldn't let Ethan learn the same lesson. The next morning, while Ethan played with his Lego set, I took out my old stationery box. Inside were yellowed letters I'd never mailed, one to my sister in Milwaukee, another to my mother, and a third to Charles, dated the year Rebecca turned 10. The ink had faded, but the words still cut. "Sometimes I want to scream, but I'm afraid it will wake her." He apologized again tonight. I nodded. I don't know what's left to say. I read it twice, then folded it back. My hands trembled. All those years I had written instead of spoken, thinking paper was safer than confrontation. But the paper never answered. It never told me that my silence would echo in my daughter's marriage. That afternoon, I began writing a new letter, to Rebecca this time. "My dearest girl, I see in your eyes the same storms I once weathered. I don't want that for you. I stayed quiet thinking I was protecting our family. I was wrong. Silence didn't keep peace. It kept pain. I love you, and I'll stand beside you, whatever you decide. I placed it in an envelope, but didn't send it yet. Some truths need to be spoken, not mailed. On Sunday evening, I drove Ethan home. The air smelled of wet leaves and coming snow. Rebecca met us at the door. Her smile looked softer, exhausted. Mark was in the living room, silent, eyes red as if he'd been crying or drinking. Maybe both. Ethan ran upstairs to his room. I took Rebecca's hand. "Honey, do you want to go for a walk?" She hesitated, glanced at Mark, then nodded. We stepped out into the chilly dusk. The sidewalks gleamed from rain. The streetlights flickered to life one by one. We walked in silence until she whispered, "He's not a bad man, Mom. He just gets angry, says things he doesn't mean." I stopped under a maple tree shedding its last leaves. "You never told me," she said, eyes dimming in the dusk. "I know." I thought keeping quiet was the same as keeping strong. It wasn't. It was fear. And fear taught you to endure instead of speak. Rebecca's face crumpled, tears shining in the streetlight. I pulled her into my arms. "You don't have to repeat my silence," I whispered. "You can choose differently." We stood there for a long time, 2 generations wrapped in one cold night, listening to the sound of leaves falling. Soft, constant, honest. That night, after I came home, I sat on my porch again. The chill had settled deep into the air, but I didn't go inside. The stars reflected off Lake Bell like tiny lanterns, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was sitting alone. The ghosts were quieter now, as if they were listening. I thought about Rebecca's tears, the way her voice cracked when she said, "He's not a bad man." I'd said those same words countless times for Charles. It's funny how women learn to excuse pain like it's part of the recipe for love. But love isn't supposed to hurt this way. It's not supposed to make you smaller. That night, I whispered to the dark, "I'm sorry, Charles, but I can't protect your memory anymore." It wasn't anger I felt. It was release. Like taking off a coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing for 40 years. Ethan woke early, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up like a dandelion.
"Grandma," he said, "Mom's sad. She cried last night." I reached for his hand. "Sometimes crying is the only way we wash pain away, sweetheart." He nodded solemnly. "I don't like when Dad yells." My heart ached at how softly he said it. No bitterness, just truth. Children don't exaggerate. They don't dramatize. They just see. "Grandma," he whispered, "when Dad yells, Mom gets quiet. Why doesn't she say anything?" I looked at him, those clear brown eyes, so much like Rebecca's when she was small, and I almost couldn't breathe. Because I knew the answer. I'd taught it to her. After breakfast, I called Rebecca. "Can you come by today? Just you." She hesitated. "Is something wrong?" "No," I said softly. "But I think we've both been quiet too long." Rebecca arrived just after noon. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon tea and autumn air, drifting through the open window. She sat down at the same table where, decades ago, she'd once done her homework while Charles and I argued in the next room. I poured tea into the old floral cups I'd kept since my wedding day. The cracks in the glaze shimmered faintly in the sunlight. "Mom," she said carefully, "Mark and we talked last night. It wasn't good. I told him I might need some space." I nodded. "That's brave." She gave a bitter little laugh. "It doesn't feel brave. It feels like I'm tearing something apart." I reached across and took her hand. Sometimes things need breaking before they can heal right. You remember when you fell off your bike and broke your arm? The doctor said it healed stronger afterward. Hearts can do that too. Her eyes filled with tears. I don't want Ethan to hate his dad. He won't, I said gently. But he will remember how you handled this. That's what children remember. How we acted when love was hard. She was quiet for a while, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. Then she said, Mom, what really happened between you and Dad? You never told me the truth. I froze. For 40 years, I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head, but I never thought it would come so softly. I took a deep breath. Your father, he had a temper. He could be kind, thoughtful, but when he got angry, it was like standing in front of a storm. And I thought if I stayed calm, if I stayed silent, it would pass. Rebecca's eyes were fixed on mine. Did he ever... I nodded before she finished. Not often, but enough. And every time, he said he was sorry, and I believed him, because believing was easier than leaving. She looked down, tears sliding onto her hands. You never told me. I was ashamed, and I didn't want you to think badly of him. I thought I was protecting you. Rebecca shook her head. You were protecting him. The words stung, but they were true. For years, I'd been Charles's shield, and in doing so, I'd left my daughter unarmed. We sat there for a long time, just listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock. Finally, she said, Mom, when Mark yells, I feel that same fear. I tell myself it's not the same, but it feels familiar. I nodded. That's because silence teaches fear how to speak in new voices. She blinked at me. What do you mean? When we don't tell our stories, pain doesn't disappear. It changes shape. It shows up in the next generation wearing a different face. She stared into her tea, then whispered, I don't want to be you. It wasn't cruel, it was honest. And I smiled. Good. That means you're already doing better. After she left, I found myself standing by the window, watching the lake shimmer under the fading light. The water looked peaceful, but I knew what hid beneath. Deep, dark currents that could pull you under without warning. Silence was like that lake, calm on the surface, dangerous underneath. I walked to the mantel and picked up a picture of Charles holding Rebecca as a baby. His smile was wide, his eyes kind. People like to believe abusers look like monsters, but most of them don't. They look like people we love. I whispered to the photo, I forgive you, but I will not excuse you. And for the first time in my life, that forgiveness didn't feel like weakness. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I placed the letter I'd written on Rebecca's doorstep. By evening, she called me, her voice shaking. Mom, I read your letter. I think I understand you now. I smiled softly into the receiver. Then, maybe I finally did something right. I'm scared, she admitted. So was I. But being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're awake. That weekend, Rebecca dropped Ethan off again while she met with a counselor. He helped me hang laundry in the backyard, chattering about school and the spelling bee he wanted to win. At one point, he looked up at me and asked, Grandma,
Why do people stop saying I'm sorry after they grow up? I smiled sadly. Because grown-ups sometimes forget that words can heal. He frowned thoughtfully. Then maybe I'll stay a little longer. I laughed and kissed his forehead. That might be the smartest thing you ever do. That Sunday evening, as the sun sank low, a car pulled into my driveway. It was Mark. He stepped out slowly, his face pale, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Mrs. Collins," he said, his voice low, "Rebecca told me what you shared. I don't know what to say." I nodded. "Then don't say anything. Just listen." He swallowed hard. "I love her. I really do. But when I get angry, it's like I'm someone else. And afterward, I hate myself." I studied him for a long moment. "Do you want to be better?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, I just don't know how." "Start by doing what I didn't," I said softly. "Talk. Don't hide. Don't let shame become your silence." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Ethan deserves better than me." "Then give him that. Every day, one choice at a time." He nodded, trembling. "Thank you, Mrs. Collins, for not hating me." I smiled gently. Hate never healed a soul. That night, after he drove away, I sat again on the porch swing. The air was cold, but my heart felt warm. Somewhere across town, I imagined Rebecca reading that letter again, maybe whispering it aloud. And for the first time in my life, my silence felt broken, and the world didn't fall apart. It softened. The first snow of the season came early that year. I woke up to the sound of silence, the kind only snow can bring. Soft, absolute, holy. The trees bowed under the weight of white, the lake was half frozen, and the world looked new. I brewed coffee and wrapped myself in Charles's old flannel robe. The scent of pine and bitter roast filled the air. I stood by the window watching the world outside turn silver. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe my life wasn't winding down. Maybe it was finally settling into truth. Later that morning, Ethan and Rebecca came by. Ethan burst through the door, his cheeks red from the cold, shouting, "Grandma, it's snowman weather!" Rebecca smiled shyly from behind him, holding a tin of cookies. "We thought we'd stop by. Hope that's okay?" "Always," I said, hugging her. We bundled up and went outside together. The air was crisp, our laughter visible in clouds of breath. Ethan rolled the first snowball, small but determined. Rebecca helped him shape the middle section. I stood back, watching them, mother and son working together, the rhythm of healing forming in their gestures.
At one point, Ethan looked up at Rebecca and said, "Mom, can Dad come next time?" She hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly. "Maybe, sweetheart. We'll see." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And in that single pause, I heard hope. That evening, after they left, I opened my old wooden chest, the one where I'd kept my unsent letters for decades. I took them out, one by one, and spread them across the table. So many words I never said. So many apologies, to no one in particular, or maybe to myself. I lit a candle and read each one aloud. The paper trembled in my hands, as if the past was finally exhaling. Then, one by one, I fed them to the flame. The smoke curled upward, carrying my confessions into the still air. I whispered, "Goodbye, silence." The next week, Rebecca called me after her counseling session. "Mom," she said, "Mark's been going too. We're not rushing things, but he's trying." "That's something," I said gently. She laughed softly. "You know what he told me yesterday? He said he realized he never learned how to apologize without expecting forgiveness." I smiled. That's a lesson most people never learn. Then she added, "We can't erase the past, but we can build differently this time. Quieter, kinder." Her voice caught on that last word, kinder. That's what I'd wanted for her all along. Not perfection, not control, just kindness. That night, I dreamed of Charles. He was sitting on our old porch swing, the one that used to creak under our weight, the lake glittering behind him. He looked younger, maybe the way he did before life hardened him. He smiled at me, that same charming, disarming smile that once made me forgive too easily. "Why now, Marge?" he asked in the dream. "Why speak now, after all this time?" I didn't answer at first. I just looked at him. Really looked. At the man I had loved and feared in equal measure. Then I said, "Because our daughter needed me to." He nodded, his smile fading into something softer. "You were always stronger than you thought." And just like that, he vanished, like breath in the cold. When I woke, I was crying. But it wasn't grief. It was release. The next day, I picked Ethan up from school. The roads were slippery with half-melted snow, and the air smelled of pine and winter. In the back seat, he hummed a Christmas song softly to himself. Then he asked, "Grandma, did you ever get scared when Mom was little?" I thought carefully. "Yes, sweetheart, a lot." "Did you tell her?" "No," I said quietly. "I didn't know how." He looked out the window. "Maybe that's why Mom gets quiet. Maybe she doesn't know how either." I smiled sadly. "You're smarter than all of us, Ethan." He shrugged, his breath fogging the glass. "Mom says when we talk about things, it makes them smaller. I think that's true." I nodded. It is. Sometimes wisdom comes in the smallest voices. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow and the smell of cinnamon. Rebecca invited me over. Mark was there too, nervous but trying. The house glowed with soft light, laughter, cooking, the gentle hum of a family beginning again. After dinner, Rebecca brought out old photo albums. There were pictures of her childhood, of me and Charles, smiling, pretending, surviving. Ethan pointed at one photo. "Grandma, is that Grandpa Charlie?" I nodded. "Yes, honey." He studied it, then said innocently, "He looks nice." I felt a lump in my throat. He was nice sometimes. Rebecca looked at me, her eyes soft, understanding. She reached across the couch and took my hand. "Mom," she said quietly, "thank you. Thank you for telling me the truth. It hurts, but it helps." I smiled through tears. Truth always does both. When I returned home that night, I left the porch light on. The snow had stopped, the stars bright again. I sat in Charles's old chair by the window, looking out at the world blanketed in white. For decades, I'd thought peace meant keeping things untouched, unmoved. But I realized
peace is motion, gentle, honest, forward. I whispered into the quiet, "We're okay now, Charles. You can rest, and so can I." The house creaked softly in response. Maybe it was just the cold wood. Maybe it was something more. A week later, I found an envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a letter in Rebecca's handwriting. "Mom, you once told me silence is like snow. It covers everything, but underneath, life waits to grow again. I think I finally understand what you meant. Thank you for breaking with silence, even if it took a lifetime. Because of you, Ethan will grow up in a home where voices are used for kindness, not fear. Love, Rebecca." Tears blurred the ink as I read it. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "Thank you, my girl." Weeks passed. Life found its rhythm again. Some mornings I still wake expecting to hear Charles's voice calling for coffee or Rebecca's laughter echoing down the hall. But mostly, I wake to silence. And it no longer feels heavy. It feels like grace. The lake outside glitters under the winter sun, frozen, yet alive beneath the surface. Just like me. Sometimes I wonder if people can really change. Then I remember Mark helping Rebecca clear the driveway, Ethan singing while they worked, laughter cutting through the cold air. And I think, yes, people can change. When someone finally chooses to speak, the whole world shifts a little. Winter loosened its grip on Lake Bell. By late February, thin cracks spread across the ice like silver veins. I liked to stand on the porch in the early mornings, coffee steaming in my hands, watching the first ripples return to the surface. It felt like the world exhaling after holding its breath for too long. I had done the same, held my breath for 40 years, afraid of what might happen if I let the words out. Now, when I breathed, the air felt new. One afternoon, Rebecca and Ethan came by with a surprise. Ethan burst into the kitchen waving a folded piece of construction paper. "Grandma, look!" He opened it to show a crayon drawing of 3 people standing by a lake. The tallest figure had gray hair. The middle one wore a red scarf. The smallest held both their hands. Above them, he'd written in crooked letters, "Love is loud."
I laughed softly, blinking back tears. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Why did you write that?" He grinned. "'Cause Mom said we don't keep love quiet anymore." Rebecca smiled at me from across the table, a tired, content smile that said more than any apology ever could. That spring, we started a new family tradition. Sunday picnic by the lake. We'd pack sandwiches, a thermos of lemonade, and a blanket faded from too many summers. Sometimes Mark joined, sometimes he didn't. When he did, he listened more than he talked. Progress looks like that, small, steady, imperfect. One Sunday, as ducks drifted near the shore, Rebecca leaned back on the blanket and whispered, "You know, Mom, I used to think you were the calmest woman alive. I didn't realize calm can also mean quiet fear." I nodded. It took me a lifetime to learn the difference. She smiled gently. "You taught me both." I looked at her, sun glinting in her hair, and thought how forgiveness has a way of circling back disguised as understanding. A few weeks later, I decided to sort through the attic. Dust hung in the air like tiny ghosts. I found boxes labeled Rebecca, Elementary School, Christmas 1978, Charles and Marge wedding. At the bottom was one small box I didn't recognize. Inside lay my first diary, the one I'd kept before Rebecca was born.
The pages were yellowed, my handwriting looping and naive. On the first page, I'd written, "Today I married the man who makes me feel safe." I traced the words with my finger, then closed the book gently. Safety meant something different back then. Security, predictability, approval. Now it meant truth. I placed the diary in the keep pile, not to reread, but to remind myself how far a woman can travel inside one lifetime. That night, I began writing a letter, the kind of letter I wished someone had written to me. My dear Ethan, when you grow up, you'll learn that silence can feel comfortable. It can make you believe you're keeping peace when you're really just postponing truth. If you love someone, speak. If you're hurt, speak. If you're sorry, speak. Words won't always fix everything, but they open the door so healing can walk in. And if you ever hear someone say that love is quiet, smile and remember what your grandma taught you. Love is loud. I sealed the letter, wrote his name on the front, and tucked it in the top drawer of my dresser. One day when I'm gone, he'll find it. That thought didn't make me sad. It made me peaceful. In April, when the snow melted completely, I walked to the cemetery with a bouquet of daffodils. The path was muddy, the air clean. Charles's headstone stood beneath an old oak tree, the engraving softened by time. I knelt and brushed away the fallen leaves. "Hello, Charlie," I said softly. "We've been talking about you." A bird trilled in the branches overhead. "I used to come here angry, you know. Then I came here sorry. Today, I just came to say thank you for the good parts and goodbye to the rest." The wind picked up, scattering petals across the grass. I smiled. We did our best with what we knew, but Ethan, he'll know better. By summer, the porch swing creaked again under new weight. Rebecca, Ethan, sometimes Mark. The air smelled of lemonade and freshly cut grass. Neighbors would wave as they passed, calling, "Evenin', Margie," and I'd wave back. The world hadn't changed much, but we had. One evening, Ethan asked if he could record me telling stories for the future. I laughed and said, "Sure." He held up his little tablet and pressed record. "Grandma, what's the most important thing you ever learned?" I looked at him, at Rebecca beside him, at the horizon blushing pink over the lake. I said, "Silence isn't peace. It's just the space where truth waits to be heard." He blinked. "Is that why you talk so much now?" We all laughed, a deep, unashamed sound that rose into the warm evening like a song. That night, I opened a new notebook. Clean pages, soft cover. At the top I wrote, "When I finally left the silence, my grandson reminded me why I stayed. Because I had stayed for love, for the hope that some good might come of my quiet endurance. And in the end, good did come, not from my silence, but from the moment I broke it. I wrote until the moon rose high, until my hand ached and my heart felt light. If you ask me now what I regret, it isn't the years I spent being afraid, it's that I thought fear was love. Love isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of understanding. Love is not quiet. Love listens, answers, and forgives out loud. And if my voice ever fades, I hope the echo stays long enough for Rebecca and Ethan to remember that truth. Because the story of our family isn't one of pain anymore. It's one of healing, of words spoken after years of hiding, of a little boy who drew a snowman and wrote 3 simple words that changed everything. Love is loud. I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know it just kept me small. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, Don't mistake quiet for peace. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Someone out there needs to hear it. Because one day, years from now, a child might look up at you and ask why you stayed quiet so long. And when that moment comes, I hope you can say, I didn't. Thank you for listening to Grandma Tales Corner, where every story carries a heartbeat and every heartbeat carries a memory. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and stay with us for more true, emotional stories from the soul. Until next time, take care, speak with love, and remember, love is loud.